Good day everyone, welcome to this video. Today we have a Should You Talisman episode on the M2A4 Stuart. Of course, if you're new to this series, this is where we talk about various different vehicles that I have talismans on over the years. That mostly thanks to Gaijin, because Gaijin keeps giving me them like hotcakes these days. We cover the weaponry, the armour, of course, in the case of a tank, and of course take the vehicle for a drive or flight in that case, so to speak. Obviously tanks have armour, so that's an additional thing to talk about, so it would be under weapons and armour. And then of course we compare the vehicle to its competition and come to a conclusion. All of that, if you wish to skip ahead, is in the description below. Without further ado, let's get into the M2A4's weaponry and armour. So we're going to start off with the weaponry, which normally I'd start off with the armour, but I feel we'd do something a little bit different today. And this thing actually has quite a bit of armament, so to speak, on paper. But of course, the main gun is what we're going to focus on first. This is the 37mm M5 cannon. This is a pretty solid weapon. It has a decent reload rate, reasonable turret traverse, and has very good vertical guidance. So we have -10, which used to be 5, if memory serves me correctly, and then they buffed it, thank God. Because trust me, the amount of times you'd go to work a ridgeline because you think you're playing an M3A1 Stuart, and you're not, you're playing this one, and then you just can't get the gun down. But they gave it a buff around 3 or 4 months ago, so it definitely really helps this tank out. And even the premium one is in the same boat, so that is something that you can also consider. Of course, the targeting vertical speed is actually pretty good. The overall targeting speed for the horizontal and vertical is also pretty good. And it also comes with a gun stabilizer similar to the LVT, which of course is a shoulder stabilizer, as you can tell over here. But it's not bad at all. But then we come to the interesting part of this tank. As you'll notice, there's quite a few 30 caliber machine guns sticking out this thing. There's the coax, there's the roof mounted gun, there's the hull mounted gun, and then there's 2 in these side I'd call them blisters, if that's the word I'd use. These little side blisters here and here. So, in front of the vehicle, you can theoretically fire all 5, but I wouldn't count on it. Most of the time, the ones that are going to be doing the work is the coax machine gun and the roof-mounted machine gun. Now, of course, against the biplanes and things you're going to be running into, the 30 cal could actually net you a few air kills. Believe me, I've done it before. But I wouldn't rely on it against stuff like attackers, bombers, etc., as the 30 caliber's damage output is not very good, so just take this into consideration. Of course, the 30 cal will be more than enough to do a light targets, but it's nothing to write home about. In terms of the shell, you are going to main the M51B1. Anyone who says you should main the stock round, the M74, is a muppet, because this shell is notoriously bad for its post-penetration. The M51, whilst it isn't exactly much better, is better than that and also has much better angled pen, as you can tell on the statistics there. And having 86mm of penetration at 1.0 is actually pretty strong, so there is that. In terms of the armour, we do have 25.4mm across the majority, if not nearly all, of the main surface of the tank. Of course, some parts, like the upper parts, are only 6.5, but the gun mantlet is where it gets fun on these things, because the gun mantlet on the M2A4 and the other Stuarts is pretty strong. As you can tell, it's double layered 25.4mm, so it can block some of the lower penning rounds, but most of the time people are just going to shoot your hull because they have common sense, and if they don't want to shoot here for whatever reason, they can just shoot here and take out your entire crew. The survivability with just being 4 crew members is not great, and of course the drivability of the vehicle, whilst it is very good, it can't outrun an anti-tank round, and yeah. With a top speed of 35, it's pretty fast, and of course with a 262 horsepower radial engine, as you'll probably notice back there, it is quite fast, but of course it is something you need to be considerate of. And of course, anyone firing HE can overpressure you if they hit this top part, so just bear that in mind. Overall, this is a light tank after all, so don't expect this thing to be bouncing shots like a King Tiger's front plate or anything, unless you get HFS fired at you and that thing, but that's an entirely different subject. But overall, the armor's not what's going to be keeping this thing alive, it's the mobility. Anyway, shall we go take this thing for a drive? I think we should. Let's go see how this thing handles on the, well, I call it the range because it sounds more cool. I'll see you on the range. And welcome to the range. let's go for a little drive, as we usually do. So the initial acceleration of this thing is pretty strong. Like, it's fast. Like, we're almost already up to top speed within a matter of seconds of getting off to go. The power to weight ratio is really good. The response of the tank itself is pretty good. The turret is a little bit slower than the actual hull traverse of the vehicle, but generally speaking, you're going to be turning the turret towards where you're turning anyway, like this. So combining that is actually pretty good, as you can tell. Now, one thing to note is the low speed stabilizer only works in the battle gear setting, which you can see here. If you press E on your keyboard once, of course, it will go into battle, which means you pretty much have a stabilized gun whilst you're still moving. But as you can tell, we're not going very fast. But the second you put it into CC1, the gun starts bouncing. We're going over a bump there, but you'll notice the gun isn't fully stabilized. But I'll just back up so I can demonstrate that again. But now that I'm in battle, I can perfectly shoot whilst technically still moving. The LVT can do this as well, but this tank is a little more generous when it comes to it due to its smaller size. But of course, from no HE rounds like the LVT, that's where your machine guns come in for light targets like that SDKFZ. But like I said, the maneuverability on this vehicle is really solid. I mean, it's not every day you can do a power slide in a tank and just do drifts like you're in Tokyo Drift. But as I said, the maneuverability of this vehicle is excellent. But of course, the machine guns that are forward facing, the only one that really moves is the hull mounted gun, and that's not ideal. The rest of them are fixed forward firing if it isn't in the coax or the roof mounted machine gun. But as you can tell, the roof mounted machine gun can point up pretty high. But of course, the 37 can as well. So if you can hit a plane with the 37, that's more ideal. But sometimes you might just have to rely on the little 30 cal there. But overall, this thing is really nice to drive, and it's very forgiving for newer players. It's just one of those vehicles that you can just take out for a drive and just go and have some fun. And with decent post-penetration like you see there, it's not bad at all. Of course, that's a Panzer II. They're pretty easy to take out. What I'm going to demonstrate on is that Panzer IV that you see over there. So, without further ado, you can see there the post-pen is actually pretty strong, even though it's not APHE. And with just two decently placed shots, the Panzer IV is dead. What more can you ask of this thing? It's fast, it's got a good gun, and it does really well in the driving department. So, now that we've had a look at the driving and how this thing does in terms of shooting as well, let's go back to the hangar and discuss this thing's competition, which there isn't many. See you in a moment. And welcome back to the hangar. So as I said, this vehicle really doesn't have much competition due to its strong capabilities already. And there's plenty of good reasons for that, but, well, we're going to discuss that. So if you want something that pretty much has the same gun, albeit a little better, but is also faster, a little bit more easy to drive, you're going to want the Locust. Now, the Locust doesn't have as high of a power to weight, well, in fact, it does have a high power to weight, I don't know why I'm thinking that. But the Locust, of course, has worse survivability, which, to be fair, it's a light tank. You're not really going to be bouncing shots in these things anytime soon. But generally speaking, the Locust is a better light tank for more aggressive playstyles, because the amount of times I've took this thing into top tier and just messed around with like leopards and stuff because they can't get their guns down is actually quite frequent, and it is fun, I must say. But if you want a Stuart that's a little bit more beefier, you're going to want either the M2A4 Stuart or the M3 Stuart. These are solid vehicles, and well, the M3 Stuart has a better armor profile, and I think it has a better stabilizer, I don't remember. I know for a fact the M3A1 does have the better stabilizer. I don't remember if the M3 does. I think it does, but it's not as good as the M3A1s. But generally speaking, that's really the two main competition other than the Locust is the better vehicle family members, so to speak. And just overall, it's just one of those vehicles that you really can't say anything bad about because, yeah, the armor's crap, but well, it's a light tank. It's not exactly designed to be, shall we say, like durable and all that. That's the word I'd use anyway. It's probably a poor choice of word there, but you get my point. And if you come over to the tank destroyer line, the only real usable vehicle is the M8. Like the M3 is good, but it's just too fragile given the current meta of low tier at the minute. The M8 can at least bounce a hit or two, and it has a roof mount of 50 cal, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not as good as it used to be because they nerfed it, but it's little things like that. So if you do not want to drive this thing, or talisman this thing, I should say, you have options, and they're all solid. And even if you don't talisman one of these, this is a solid choice. Now, of course, the argument could be made that you could just be better off getting the premium, but at the same time, the premium's 250G, 125G on sale, whereas the M2A4 is, I believe, 80G to Talisman. I don't remember these reserve vehicles very well. In fact, to give me an idea, they share similar price tags. Okay, no, 190G. So you're saving yourself 60G in this basis for a Talisman on the Tech Tree one. It used to be 80, but then they upped the price, it seems. But the thing is, with the premium one, of course, you do get slight better SL gain, but who really cares about that? Who's going to grind SL using that? But overall, there isn't really much that I can say about this thing in terms of its competition, because all of its competition is pretty equal to it. So, now we come to the conclusion. If you really do want to Talisman a low tier tank, this is definitely a good candidate. Of course, I've already talked about if you've skipped ahead to the end, of course, that is entirely irrelevant, but some people actually watch these all the way through. The point is that there isn't really much competition going for this thing. The only thing that's competitive is the Locust, the M8 HMC, which can be situational at best with its 75mm, and the other family members of the Stuart, which, yeah, they're better, but this thing's a lower BR and doesn't have to face as dangerous stuff. There's really nothing bad to say about this thing, and for once in this series, this is definitely what you should go for. But of course, that's going to change with the next vehicle in this series, because, well, now that we've done the Stuart, we move on to the bad apple of the bunch. This ugly thing. I can't wait to really give this thing a description, because I've only covered this thing in a video once, and I hated it. And, yeah, it's not going to be getting a good Joe review, let's put it that way. But I hope you enjoyed seeing today's episode on the M2A4 Stuart as part of the Should You Talisman series. And of course, we will be moving on to this sack of crap in terms of tanks. And of course, we'll be working our way up the F3, F2 the next episode after this one will be the F3, F2. And then we will move to the M2 and go from there. But anyway, I'll leave you all to it for today. I really hope you enjoyed seeing the M2A4 get its fair share of, shall we say, positive opinion, because it definitely deserves it. But don't expect much when it comes to this thing, is all I'm saying. Anyway, I'll leave you all to it for today, and I'll see you all on the next one.